Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me directly through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is an internationally syndicated show solely due to the love and support that you all continue to show. We're available across all major podcast distributors. And like I mentioned, people, if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in because we are delighted to showcase this next guest on our network. And on the line with us today, we have the impressive Dan Kraus. And we're going to be discussing his amazing poetry book, Everything About You. Poems inspired by love and loss, available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, all the regular online book resellers. But if you want to gather everything that Dan has in store, check out his personal website, dankrausbooks.com. You're going to gather more information on him, more information on this fantastic book, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. So once again, that's dankrausbooks.com. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Dan here on the line. People, the moment we start talking about his book, the moment you start to hear some of his poetry, the moment you start to hear some of his background and what inspired him to embark upon this journey, not only are you going to be inspired yourself, not only are you going to be finding yourself in a lot of his words, you're going to be hooked, man. You're going to run to Amazon and Barnes & Noble because this is a poetry book that's unlike any other. The connectivity, the relatability that this book has and how accessible it is one that I truly find remarkable, and I think it sets it apart from other books in its genre. At the end of the day, Dan is the expert, man. It's his life that he's pulling from. It's his poetry that he's written, and he's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. Sit back and strap in. Dan, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, Dan, listen, man, it really is a true pleasure to have you here with us. As I mentioned in my opening, your book I find special for so many reasons, but first and foremost, by the fact that it's so personal to you, and we get that, while at the same time being so accessible. Your book, your poetry is something that leaps beyond the borders of just being about you. The words that you're able to string together make it so compatible, make it so understandable for its readers. And it's something that I remember when I was reading some of your poetry, I was just instantly taken back to certain moments in my life that left a mark. That left a mark to me specifically, but your words that had nothing to do with it were able to formulate that connection. I think, listen, that's a mark of a great writer, man. That lends credence to you as a poet, and it's something that I absolutely love, and I know my listening audience is going to as well. So thank you very much for writing the book. Thank you even more for being here to discuss it. Before we go into some of this fantastic poetry, first and foremost, Dan, tell us more about yourself and how you even began writing poetry.
Well, a little bit about myself. I'm from St. Louis. I lived here all my life. I did go to school down in Springfield, Missouri for a few years, graduated there, and then remained down there and actually opened a nightclub and had a bar for 4 or 5 years. Poetry for me has always been something I've done. My mom's side of the family, my uncles all could write poetry, always would write stuff down for their kids, for their wives. So I just have always been around it. And for me, it's always been a way to express myself and my emotions and how I'm feeling, whether it's happy or whether it's sad. I can express that through poetry. It's not Keating, it's not Robert Frost. It's just flat out emotions that I feel and feelings that I have. And that's how my process is of writing poetry.
You know, that's a great segue that you've established there, Dan, because that's really the next place that I wanted to go. Walk us through your writing process. Everybody's different. But I'm curious to know, Dan, did you have a daily routine, or did these poems just come to you spontaneously?
No, poems came to me spontaneously, still come to me spontaneously, and I still try to stop and write. One of my favorite poems is Crossing a Bridge in the book, and I can tell you exactly the bridge I was crossing when I went across that water and stopped on the side of the road and wrote the entire thing. Mm-hmm. And that is mostly how they're written. Some I come back to. I'll put in my notebook, and then I'll come back to those later, or I won't have exactly what I want to say, and then something will come to me, and I'll have something to say, and I go back and I finish it. For the most part, though, those are all spontaneous feelings, whether it's first thing in the morning or it's a feeling I'm having at night going to bed, and I'm lonely, or I'm missing this person, or I have something I feel I'm missing in life. And mm-hmm. For me, I just write it down.
Dan, listen, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I love your title. All right. I love it because, listen, everything about you, it's engaging, it's provocative, it carries a distinct meaning for each individual reader, right? Well, I'm curious, Dan, I want to know, man, let's jump right into it. What does everything about you mean to you, Dan?
It is exactly what you said. This was going back to my relationship, and she asked me one time, she asked me a bunch of times, she's like, what is it about me that you love? When I would say, I love you, I'm in love with you, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And it was always, why though? Why do you love me? And I don't know if it actually took us breaking up for me to write. Well, it did take us breaking up for me to write that. But I think I've had those thoughts in my brain the entire time we were going out. But once we did break up and I had time to reflect, I did go back and think, this is what I like about you or love about you. Mm. And that's 100%. I knew the title of the book the minute I wrote that poem. I knew exactly what I wanted that title to be, because that expresses everything there is to express in that book.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up because, listen, ladies always pull that question, don't they? Why do you love me? Why did you choose me? I mean, such universal questions that we're always asked. And, listen, all men listening in right now can understand that and relate to it.
In the moment, throws a question like that at you, you stumble over yourself. I had a long time to think about it, and this is why I love you. I love you for your hair, your lips, just holding you, touching you, talking with you. I mean, I had time to reflect and be able to put it down in words, and I just happened to be able to put it down in rhyming words.
People, again, the book is called Everything About You. Poems inspired by love and loss. It's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, dankrausbooks.com. Head on over there and pick up your copies, because I'm telling you, this is a poetry book unlike any other, and one you're going to want to add to your shelf. Head on over there. Listen, holidays are right around the corner. This is a fantastic gift to get for somebody else as well. You know where to go. Dan, your poems, as I've mentioned, man, they convey the full gamut of the human experience. Right? Love, loss. And when we're talking about loss, in your poems, you even talk about the loss of your parents and everything in between, from a significant relationship and so on and so forth. Well, I'm curious, Dan, because I think you've done this beautifully, but I want to ask, how did you balance expressing those emotions through your writing while at the same time making your content relatable to its readers?
Well, everybody is going to or has lost a parent, or lost parents. Mm-hmm. I have a friend of mine, he lost both his parents within 2 days, had a funeral together for them. So, wow. I mean, everything I write about, while there are some very personal things in there, of things that we did, things that, places that we would go, most of the things, when you read, you are going to be able to reflect and say, oh my gosh, I remember that. In fact, I've had a friend of mine, a couple friends, they've purchased a book, and I had an email from one of them and said, I have not gotten through it yet because it brings back so many memories of my life and my relationships that I can't get through it because those are the feelings I had. I just happened to be able to express them, in a way that I could write them down and make them very relatable to just about anybody.
Mm-hmm. Dan, you have a poem entitled Fighting Demons. And first and foremost, another great title, right? Because it packs a vivid image and has instant relatability, right? So you're doing a good job there with these titles and how you select them. But the reason why I think it works, because we all have our own demons that we're fighting, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. We're all battling our own demons internally. Regardless of what those demons may represent, we all can understand that and figure out our own process for going through it and our own times that we had those internal battles. But talk to us about how writing about these darker aspects of loss helped you confront and even process your emotions, Dan.
Sure. I think fighting demons to me it's funny because my persona, I believe, is very confident. People think that I'm very confident. I present myself that way. I'm fun. I'm always the last to leave the party. And when I actually have time to reflect and sit by myself, I have internal struggles and insecurities, just like everybody, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's what fighting demons was to me. While on the outside, I had a lot of loss. I had a loss of parents, loss of relationship, loss of job. Internally, I had things that you can't really. I always think it's funny when you're talking to friends or family or whatever, and hey, how are you doing? They don't want to really hear how you're doing. They want to just go through the necessities of asking that question. Mm-hmm. They want you to say, I'm doing great. I'm doing fine. When somebody asks me that, I'm like, let me tell you this. And, oh, boy. You can almost feel them shutting off. Mm-hmm. So fighting demons for me was writing about what I struggle with internally, what the problems I have, every day, basically.
Mm. Dan, it's interesting how often... I was just kind of going off that last note that you just made. It's interesting how often people ask that benign question, how are you? And it gets overlooked, right? I mean, I remember growing up on the East Coast, right? Small community, tight knit. And people, when they ask that question, they genuinely expected a response, right? And here in Southern California, it doesn't happen like that, man. It's anything but. It really is just a placemat. Exactly. It's interesting how different communities, relate and respond to that question here. But, as we close out, Dan, let's focus on the future, man. I'm curious, are you planning on writing any other books? And what do you hope to achieve with it moving forward if you are?
I'm not exactly sure what I want to achieve. I will tell you. Going forward, there's another book called Everything About You 2 that just came out. That's available also on Amazon and everywhere else. Mm-hmm. And the audio will be coming out soon. So that's just a continuation. Although I've read it, and I've read it numerous times, it's a continuation and it's an ending of the grief. And if you get it, as you go through the book, you'll kind of have a feeling of, okay, there's hope. There's hope coming with these next poems. There's a hope. I'll go back and forth every once in a while, but for the most part, there's a poem called Transition, and it's just about me meeting somebody else and moving on, moving mm-hmm. forward with my life, and I have to finally do that. As far as writing other genres, I have a working title right now, and I know this will be the title. The book is called "My Friends Call Me Stinky," and I tell stories. I'm a storyteller. And I have just a plethora of stories from my life, of me being on the Oprah Winfrey Show, going out and partying with Otis Day and the Knights, owning the bar, just different things. And they're just funny stories. They're short stories about my life, all the way back from when I was born. My mom didn't take pictures of me at the hospital because she thought I had water on the brain, and she thought I was deformed and thought I was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen. And I do not have any baby pictures of me in the hospital. that starts the story, and that kind of tells you the story of my life and how my life has progressed from there. So yes, I'll get away from poems. I have a third poetry book that I'm kind of halfway, 3/4 of the way through. So there's a lot of different things that this has brought out. This whole process, this whole emotional roller coaster has brought out a creative side. I hopefully that continues.
Dan, final question here, man. Is there anything else that we haven't yet discussed, or maybe something that we have that you really want to add or even double down on for our listening audience here today before we close?
When you read the book, you can read them a few at a time. And I kind of touched on that with my friend that said she couldn't get through it. She had to read a couple and then she'd stop because it just brought up too raw of emotion that she had to stop. And I kind of tell everybody, and I think I even wrote it in the book somewhere, read these a few at a time. That's probably the best to digest them. Don't just blow through it. It's not a novel that you're going to read so quickly right through. It's a journey, and it's a 2, 3, 4 at a time. Something that you can reflect on, and then come back and reflect on some more. So I think that's probably a kind of a bigger thing to convey.
People, I love everything that we've discussed here today. And what I love even more than all of that is we've barely scratched the surface. All right, there is still so much left to be discovered. There's so much words left on those pages that we haven't even tapped into. Once again, the book is called Everything About You, Poems Inspired by Love and Loss by Dan Kraus. Head on over to dankrausbooks.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the online book resellers. Just type it into a Google search, man. You're going to find this book, and you're going to be greeted with this fantastic book, as well as the others, the moment that they become available, because Dan has a lot more in store, and Dan Kraus is a name you need to get familiar with. Head on over there today, pick up your copies, get lost in this wonderful journey. Like I said, holidays right around the corner. This is a fantastic book for you to get as a gift for someone else to add to their shelf as well. Dan, this has been a true pleasure, man, an absolute delight. So inspiring and just a wonderfully in-depth conversation that we truly enjoyed. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Oh, thank you for having me.